This is Jennifer Pepito with the Restoration Home podcast. This is the show where we talk about cultivating a flourishing family culture through life-giving habits. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be chatting with my daughter Emelie and co-host about her recent wedding. We are homeschoolers, and so we did a DIY at-home wedding, and I thought it'd be really fun to chat about it with you and Emelie. So thanks for joining today, Emelie.
Thank you for having me on.
So Emelie is the oldest of our 7 children, and she just got married to her sweetheart. So Emelie and her sweetie had been talking about marriage for a little while. And then all of a sudden they were like, here's the constraints around our time. Here's why we don't actually have a lot of time. And so we need to get this show on the road. So go ahead and take it off from there, Emelie.
Yeah, we got engaged January 17th and we got married February 13th. So we did it very fast. We decided to get married at the end of December though. So I had a couple weeks to kind of start planning, but all that meant was just buying my dress and kind of and it went from an elopement at the last minute. I mean, I think it went from an elopement maybe even after we got engaged.
Yeah, so it's been on my dream list. Like, I write down my vision and goals every year, which is why I've been able to write books and start the Restoration Home community. I highly recommend having a vision for your life. And one of the things on my vision list has been to attend my daughter's weddings, which is something completely out of our control. Like, some of you, your girls got married young. Some of you have daughters who are still waiting. Some of you have preschool daughters that it's a long way off. But, for us, we were part of like this courtship culture. And so ever since Emelie was like 16 years old, I was like, oh, maybe that's the guy she'll marry. Maybe that's the guy she'll marry. And her sweetheart didn't come along when she was 16 or 17 or 18.
He came along when I was 30.
So time had gone on and it had been a dream to attend my daughter's wedding. But then because of time constraints, they actually had kind of planned on just doing an elopement. And so I was like, okay, well, at least you need a good photographer and a good dress, because you don't want to get married and then look back and not even have good pictures. Like, you really deserve this. And then I was like, well, at least you need a good photographer, a good dress, and your siblings there. And at least, and of course your parents. And then at least you need a good photographer, a good dress, your siblings there, your parents, grandparents. So,
Yes. And I had wanted an elopement, but then I had seen these geese on Etsy, like these little gray geese, and they had 4 goslings. And I was like, I want that cake topper. So I think before we were even engaged, at the end of December, when he was like, let's elope in February, I bought those because I was like, I want that so badly. And it was, I will someday write about our story, because it has just been so God from start to finish, and it would never, so good and so hard. And I don't think that we would have made it if it weren't for like the grace and gifting of the goodness of God over our relationship from start to finish. And it was a culmination of sort of that blessing, because I went one Saturday where my mom was already going to be in town. I can't remember why she was going to be in town, but it was like this one weekend she was going to be in town. And I had just finished deciding I was going to elope with Kagan. And then I was like, let's go dress shopping. And so we went dress shopping. And on the first time, we found this dress that fit with no alterations needed. And then my Bible study ladies, who's this really beautiful group of women, they found out and they're like, we want to throw you a shower. And then my really darling cousin was like, oh, I want to throw you something too. And my aunt got involved in that. And then I decided I wanted to build tables for the wedding. And I'd had this dream, and I am all for vision casting. But I think I looked at my Pinterest board 2 times. I found one tablescape that I was like, oh, I like this tablescape, and I want that. And I built tables with a neighbor, and one of my climbing partners, who's like 67 years old, came by for an afternoon and sanded tables. And my friend who lived on my property for a year while they built out a rig, he came over. He's also 67. mid 60-year-old friends.
6'7".
Oh my gosh. He came and he refinished the tables for me, and a friend did flowers. Like it was so beautiful how everything came together. We ended up with 24 guests, and I went to thrift stores and I bought champagne flutes and water glasses, or like cocktail glasses, 24 of them for like $12. And then my aunt had dishes, and I borrowed those dishes, and she had cutlery, and I borrowed that cutlery, and it flowed together. I borrowed candlesticks from another friend. It was unbelievable how the details just fell into place. Like, it felt like we worked hard, but it felt effortless in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know so many of you are like, why are we talking about weddings here? We want to learn about family culture or how to raise our children for the Lord or things like that. But this is sort of the down the road vision. And part of what I want you to hear about our story is just the out of the box thinking that you should be starting now. Because, we talked to some people around the time that we were planning this who, had spent $60,000 on a wedding. And for us, like with values of being debt free or values of simple living, that just was never going to happen in our family. I had in my head, like, we could spend $5,000 to $10,000 on a wedding. And I know that was, low. I know that was a low amount to be thinking of, but in our value system, we don't spend like a fortune on a one-day event. We would, help them put down a down payment on a house if the funds were there to do so. So it was already in our worldview to do things a little simpler. The downside of that is that we couldn't invite everybody we love. Like, there are so many people that we love who there wasn't space because it was a winter wedding. We did it February 13th. And that meant that we had to be prepared to have it inside. And in fact, the dinner was inside, which was part of why there was only 24 people there. We unfortunately had to exclude some cousins, and, not all of the aunts and uncles could come. We loved them all, and we were very sad that some of them couldn't come. But, so it was really special, though, to see this event come together that was so meaningful for Emelie and her now husband, and to see how the family and community came together on it. And this is what we're talking about with building restoration communities. Restoration Home is not just about your own personal family, but it's about the community you're building, because for the wedding, we had one person who we've hosted a conference in our community for homeschoolers the last few years. She and her husband took all the meat home and barbecued for us. And then another friend who's part of our homeschool group here, she did Emelie's bouquet. And then on the day that I was standing on the front porch putting together the bouquets for the tables, she came by to drop off the bridal bouquet and help me finish out the table bouquets. So there was so much community involvement in this wedding that, we paid a professional photographer, somebody that we love, who is part of the community as well, paid for a cake to be made from up in Reading, actually, and trucked it down to our hometown in Sonora. But so much of it was completely homemade. And that was one way that we were able to invite a couple of the aunts and uncles, is that I told my sisters, like, okay, this is a really small wedding. It's in my house already with my, 7 children and spouses, and then a couple of people who were there for Emelie's husband. There was more people than we could just about fit in here. But I really wanted my sisters. And I was like, hey, how about if you guys help me cater this thing, and then I can have you here. It's really small. This is one way I can make sure the people that I love the most are here. And so my sister and her husband and my brother and his wife came down, and they did the catering. And my other sister, who wasn't able to come because she was working, was able to send down this like glorious Caesar salad and bread from her Pizzaiola restaurant in the Sacramento area. So it was amazing how our community, our family, our friends came together. And it wasn't like any one person bearing this big load. I know when we lived in Mexico, for things like weddings and quinceañeras, they have the community all pitches in monetarily. Like, people will sponsor, one person will pay for the caterer, another person will pay for the hall. It wasn't like this. We hosted it at our home. we borrowed a few chairs. Emily and our neighbor built a couple tables, but it wasn't that there was this financial pressure on a lot of people. It was just community-wise, people coming together to share their talents. And then the showers were amazing too, because we did plan this really fast, and it would have been 100% understandable if everyone was like, sorry, we can't give you a shower, there's not enough time. And these were people who we weren't even able to host at the wedding. And so you guys might have negative comments for us on that, but they were people who loved Emelie, who Emelie has invested in over the years, and who, because they loved her, hosted a party for her. And so it didn't feel like a small thing. Like, you deserve to be celebrated. You've like invested in people. You've been an amazing older sister and daughter and friend. And so it's like, she really deserved to be celebrated, but the time constraints, her husband's, job situation, there was a lot that meant we couldn't have a giant wedding, and still people were so generous.
Yeah, they were incredible. And I think it was just so beautiful to see, just like see the friendships and the community. I was so blown away. I was so honored and blessed by it. And I didn't expect any of it. Like, I was just going into it with like, I'm going to elope. And then as it grew, I was just so in awe. And I had so much fun, like way more fun than I could have ever imagined. And I don't mean that in like a hedonistic way. I mean that in a really like wholehearted, joyful way of like, it was just pure delight being able to celebrate with people. Like the bridal shower that my friends up here gave me, we like played fishbowl, and I loved seeing all these people in a room, and like everyone just seemed to be enjoying each other so much. And that was really my dream and goal for the wedding. Was I did not want, I only wanted customs involved that would get people connected, or to like, I wanted like a fire pit, and for people to hang around the fire pit, and I wanted dancing. Some of the people in my family love dancing. Like I wanted things that would give people really good memories, and just have it be about the people who are coming. And just like the weather we got, like literally was sandwiched in by storms. We had 2 days of pouring rain before it, beautiful weather the day before, unseasonably warm weather the day of, and then the next day was beautiful, and then storms started rolling in on like the Sunday, Monday. And it was just, again, like just a gift from God to see like, I had my dream wedding in a month, and I felt so incredibly loved and enjoyed the process so much. And I think, yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, and another, like, I love that you mentioned the weather, because it was also a really big step of faith to have an outdoor wedding ceremony in February. And we, obviously God doesn't always answer our prayers exactly how we ask, but he really answered that prayer, because right now we're sitting here and there's snow outside, and yet on the day of the wedding we all sat outside and the sun shone, and it was really, really pretty. My mom decorated an arch that we had borrowed from our conference committee. So I think this is, I just think as you're listening, start thinking about your community, because these events are coming for you, weddings and bridal showers and baby showers, and these events are coming for your family too. And just thinking about the relationships that you're building now are going to be that community that comes together to celebrate your family when you come to these big events like that. And so, even thinking about maybe you do know someone right now whose kids are getting close to getting married. The friend who came over and did the bouquets, her children are, like 6 and 4, 6 and 8 or something. They're young kids, and yet she's investing now in community. And the friend whose husband barbecued the meat for us, her daughter's not quite ready to get married, but someday we'll be there for her. And same with my family. And so as you are, looking at life and looking at the way you do life, thinking about how you're investing in community and how you're building community so that we can do life in a sustainable way. Like, it's not sustainable for most of us to spend 50,000 plus on a wedding. And, doing something like that might be a sacrifice that's not worth it later on. If what you really need is to start a business, buy a house, finish college, whatever it might be. And so being able to think creatively and out of the box, I'm really, really proud of how we were able to pull this off with with so much simplicity, especially thinking about, we just started the season of Lent and the season of really reflecting on God's goodness. And that was, the bigger part of that theme of the wedding was just reflecting on the beauty of a covenant. My husband gave a wonderful message when he officiated the wedding ceremony, and, just thinking about covenanting as a community, as a married couple, and really starting your marriage, your married life with so much freedom and hope, and without that bondage. Because I know, for some people today in culture, what's really happening is they're just delaying marriage for a long time, and they're delaying starting a family so they can save up a lot of money for a big showy wedding. And that might be robbing them of some real joy in being able to have a family.
Yeah, I think the other thing that the whole process, like, it wasn't easy. And I think that was the other thing, is that, Mom mentioned it a few times, where we have, we had a limited amount of space and a limited amount of time. And there was undoubtedly some pain. I think it's kind of a trope, but I think there's often pain around weddings. I think they're so exciting and so intimate and so beautiful. And then at the same time, it can cause, just some pain sometimes. And I think so there was some of that. And I think it was learning how to navigate that in community is so interesting, because you have to learn how to have so much tenderness, but also stand by your values, and finding that place of like, I can't budge on this. Like, there was, I think, things that people would have maybe, like timing wise, maybe people would have wished it was different timing wise, and space wise, I know there's people who wish it was different space wise. And staying in this place of like tenderheartedness, because as a family, like, forget about weddings, but you have these values that are so meaningful to you, that are really essential to what God's called you to walk out. And they're going to rub some people the wrong way. And more, even in society, like, we're having to stand our ground really lovingly on certain values of like, yeah, I don't think that, I don't think that it's okay for men to marry men or women to marry women. And I'm going to rub you up the wrong way by being really clear on this value I hold, and yet still stay in this place of tenderness towards you. And kind of a random lesson to pull from a wedding, but that was definitely something that I had to kind of learn, because I am at heart in some ways a people pleaser, where I want everyone to like me. And sometimes the things that we pursue in life are going to come at the cost of being liked. And being able to grow that sort of spiritual backbone, where you're not like tough and like, like, I don't really care what you think, because that's never the heart of Christ. Even when he was taking like the strongest stands of righteousness, or calling the Pharisees, whitewashed sepulchres, he was never coming at them with this like, I'm so tough. It was always this truth telling and this grief and this tenderness. And so really having to fight for that place was something that I recognize that I'll probably have to do a lot more of in the future. Because the other thing is, when you're a people pleaser, you're going to be a people pleaser at the cost of those who are closest to you. And so like I going into this with like a month to prepare for the wedding, there's a lot of things that I had to let go of, where I was like, it cannot be perfect. And then, I was also working full time up until the day of the wedding, and I knew that I had to let a lot go in terms of what things looked like or how things turned out. But I also wanted some things to be right. So this balance. But in the midst of that, I kept, and then also like I'm working, so I don't have time to do like all the beauty treatments or like anything like that. Like, I was so fortunate to, people gifted me a facial, which was incredible. But a lot of running around. Both bridal showers I went to, I got ready. One, I put on my makeup in the car. The other, I was working in the yard all day, and I took like 15 minutes to throw on some makeup and run out the door. So like very unbridled in some ways. And the whole time I was like, I'm this is the beginning. Like, this wedding it was my dream wedding. I got my dream wedding in a month, which is, I know that sounds like, it was just such a, I was delighted by God. I felt God's delight in me. And like, my good father had so much tenderness towards me. And so that was so precious. But at the same time, I was so aware of the fact that I was like, this is the beginning of this is the beginning of the next portion of the rest of my life. This is a day that is so important and also so insignificant, if that makes sense. Like, it is the day I am covenanting. And for my husband and I, that was really a big deal. Like, we were both like, like, part of my vow was, I will kill you before divorcing you. And it's, obviously tongue in cheek, I wouldn't do that. But for us, really hearkening back to what a covenant means, what a vow means, and holding fast to that. And also being aware that this is just a day that we're saying those vows, and that the real beauty, the real celebration is in the trudging day by day and keeping those vows. And like the whole, like, trying to be beautiful as a bride, I was like, I have the rest of my life to be beautiful for my husband. Like, this is like, I want to be beautiful today. It was really fun. Like, I was a tomboy growing up, and I had this whole story with an eating disorder. And so to be able to be so healed by the grace of God that I could feel so lovely for a day was such a testimony to what God has healed in my life and in my heart. But I also, even like the getting ready part, I was like, this is just like the start. Like, I have a lifetime to show up for my husband in a beautiful, feminine way that brings peace into the stress and chaos of his life. And so, yeah, it was a really amazing thing, because it was busy, it was intense, but I also had like so much space to kind of step back with God and like watch these things happen, and also make really conscious choices to want to be like making it a season where I'm planting even just ideas or dreams for what the rest of our life would look like.
Yeah, I love that you were so delighted by it. And one of the things you mentioned was that not everybody we loved was able to come, and that was a really hard thing. Like, for some people the timing just wasn't right. For others, we didn't have the space, even though they were part of the people we loved. We just really had to keep it to siblings and parents, and then I was able to sneak my two siblings in to help with food. But I think that one of the things that's so important to note is that we have to put our spouse before, the Bible says, like, is it a Bible verse, or is it a vow? There's a vow that says forsaking all others.
Yes, I think that might just be
a vow. But there's this concept of really putting your spouse first, and this was the sacrifice. It was, it meant that there were beloved people who weren't able to come. But this was the cost of, marrying somebody who is going to be deployed. And so you're trying to get as much time as a married couple in, especially, the just kind of being done with long distance. And so it did mean that there were some beloved people who weren't able to be there. But the joy is there's still a lifetime to have relationships. And we talked a few weeks ago about the book, The Legacy Life by David Green, and he talks in there about how families can work through conflict. And one of the ways that they do that is just by believing the best about each other. Like, there was some disappointment surrounding the timing and, it not working out then for some people to be here. But what you can do in those family situations where maybe you do have to skip Christmas because you have a brand new baby and it's just too much, or maybe you do have to limit your guest list to a party or a wedding or whatever it might be, but just recognizing that the story's not over with that one event. There's lots of time still in your life to build a relationship with those people, and you do have to put the first people first, which would be God, and then your spouse, and then your children, and then the rest of them. And so, trying to figure out those balances as you are navigating life, as you are navigating building community. It's like, we were so grateful for the way community and family showed up for this wedding, but ultimately, we, as a family, we have had to put our own kids first, and then church involvement, and then community involvement. It's never been the other way around, and yet still community and God showed up for Emelie for her wedding. Is there any other thoughts that you want to share before we close this out, Emelie?
I just I just think that marriage is a beautiful thing. No, I'm kind of joking, but I really hope that, obviously it's kind of a random podcast episode for Restoration Home, but I hope that it gives people a lot of joy, not just to dream about weddings with their children, but to dream about little, like, just celebrations with God. I think that was really the biggest thing, is it was just a celebration where it felt like God was orchestrating it, and among some really hard things. And I think as Christians, especially with just how much is pushing in on us on all sides. Like, I think I've told this story before, but my aunt used to, when I lived with them in London for a little bit, like, we'd go out driving and she had really bad RA and she needed a parking spot near the front of buildings. And she would just be like, all right, Jesus, I need a parking spot right up front. And we would drive around, no parking spot. We'd do it again, and she'd be like, please, Jesus. We'd drive around the third time, and there it was. And so often we can chalk up the little beautiful moments in our lives to coincidence. We can ignore them, or we can use them to feed ourselves a story. And I don't mean story as in fiction. I mean the narrative that we live in, that we have a good God who's in control, who has our back, who loves us, who's making things right even through chaos and uncertainty and darkness and oppression around us. And that's really what this wedding was for me, is like lots of really beautiful little moments where I was like, I have a good God who, in the face of so much disappointment and pain and exhaustion and so many other things, is orchestrating these precious, beautiful moments for me. And yeah, I really hope that people will take that from this.
I love that so much. It's interesting. Ronald Rolheiser says that sanctity has to do with gratitude. To be a saint is to be fueled by gratitude, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's so important for whatever season you're in, that if you can start to see the good that God is doing in your life and the good that God is doing in your children, and begin to cultivate the virtue of gratitude instead of the vice of bitterness, you're going to be able to see the goodness of God in the land of the living. I think so often it is just about perspective, because there were plenty of hard things, that have happened in the last few years or months or whatever, but we were able to focus in instead on all these beautiful little gifts from God, like friends who made beautiful flower bouquets, or friends who barbecued meat and brought delicious macarons, or family who sent down amazing bread and salad, and just so many people who blessed us. Another friend, 2 different people baked sourdough bread for our wedding. So just such a beautiful life that we can live, even in the midst. And I know so many of you are hearing terrible things on the news and trying to figure out what you should know and what is important to do and know. And I think that, when we can make our world just a little bit smaller and do really good in the community we live in, do good to your neighbors and your children and your husband, and begin to sort of cultivate these islands of virtue in the midst of chaos, we will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. We will see, just like you saw it in the time of Saint Benedict, and I talk about in Habits for a Sacred Home, that it is these small acts of love and kindness that are world changing, much more so than reading all the bad news and then posting about it. So thank you so much for joining the Restoration Home podcast. You can find some links in the show notes. We just came out with a new Easter guide. It's a 5-day Easter book flood, sort of in the same model as the Christmas book flood, and it has some beautiful stories. We also have a free 40-day Lent reading plan. We'll link that in the show notes. And we have a free Passover guide we'll link in the show notes. Passover has been one of those anchoring holidays for our family, where each year on the date of Passover, we're we celebrate the gift of Jesus' death and resurrection through that special kind of Last Supper meal. So we'll link those 3 celebrations in the show notes. And we just pray that the celebrations that you're having this winter and spring are full of the goodness of God.